Wix Studio, one end-to-end web creation platform for your agency to deliver exceptional work with absolute efficiency.
The #1 long-form writer that helps SEOs outrank competition at the click of a button using real-time research and NLP. Start ranking content today with contentatscale.ai.
Hello. My name is Jared. I head up the content marketing teams at Wise, but there's one team that I want to focus on today, which probably makes a lot of sense. It's the SEO content team. So people often ask me, what does the SEO content team do? And in a nutshell, we run the Wise blog. But I actually think it kind of undersells the results and the work that we put in. What we've actually done is created a really powerful content powerhouse, which generates huge returns for Wise, and a lot of organic traffic and a lot of success. So that's what I want to focus and tell you about today. I have split these very genuine lessons into two parts. So first up, we have anything that's to do with running the operation, the content, and tips and tricks I picked up along the way. And the second part is more around some of the data and the results that we've seen off the back of that too. But I've got 105 slides in 20 minutes, so I think we need to get on with it. The first lesson I learned is plan a publishing powerhouse in advance. So dream big and really write down what you hope you're going to get to one day. I did this in November 2019. I've no idea where the time went. But I'm really glad I had a blueprint. It didn't come to life in the way I expected it would, but it gave me something to work towards as time progressed. So today, this team is now 41 people that speak 33 different languages, and we cover 57 different markets with SEO content. This is what the team structure looks like now. We have a global lead, we have technical global specialists, and we segment the team into different regions, which makes sense for us for the Wise product. This isn't the team I imagined first off, and it took a lot of time to get here. We had to do upskilling and training and move people around to get to this point. But my takeaway is just to have a bit of a vision in advance so that one day it might come true. And of course, these are the people who've published these 15,000 blog articles over the last years. So number two, second lesson I've learned is to focus on the right KPIs, and there's one KPI that I value above all others. And there's so many things you can look at, and yes, we do look at them all, but content output as your primary KPI has been really, really beneficial for us. And actually, you can ignore a lot of the noise and just have a lot of faith in the process, which is ironically what this slide says. And it's really easy for me to say today that you can trust the process and just publish content and the good stuff will follow. But I want to kind of hopefully instill that same message into you all and show you something that we've learned so that you can take that away with you as well. And literally, if I was starting again from scratch, if somebody asked me to build up a content operation, I would say, figure out your keywords and your content plan, and then focus on publishing. Just publish the first 500 to 1,000 pieces of content, and let's worry about measurement a little bit later down the line. Don't obsess over it on the way. Which leads me, of course, to this third point, which is never stop publishing new content. So this graph is the total number of blog articles published on the Wise blog since January 2019. So over here on the left, we had around 2,000 pieces of content, all the way up to today, which is 15,000, as you now know. Guess what happened? Organic traffic roughly followed the same trend. And I'm really grateful, actually making these slides made me realize it, I was really grateful that I didn't prioritize organic traffic as a primary KPI month on month to obsess over, because there are 14 times on this graph, that's more times than there are red crosses, where I would have been quite stressed and would have been panicking, because there are 14 times where we'd lost traffic month on month, or there was a prolonged decline in traffic, or there was just a really stagnant period that we couldn't get out of. But when you compare the two together, you can see that trend is really nice and positive over the long term. So it's really helpful for us to just have this primary KPI of keep getting as much content out as you can. And that's what we did. Then thinking about content planning, what we have realized is that user behavior tends to be fairly uniform, regardless of the language and the way that people are interacting with your content. So we plan our content on a quarterly basis. We do all the keyword research, figure out what wants to be published for that coming quarter. 90% of everybody's content plan comes from data and insights that we have from existing content that we already published on older markets in other languages. But they are native speakers of each language. They do their own keyword research to find the localized version of that topic for their market. Maybe 10% of a content plan is something entirely unique to that market, which couldn't be extrapolated globally. So I wanted to share some tips. If you are in a position that I was in, which is you have to launch a long tail of content in loads of different languages and you don't know where to begin, there's 2 options I have for you. So if you have an especially long list of languages, I recommend you could hire somebody like a new market specialist whose job it is just to launch batches of content in different languages, month on month, quarter on quarter, assess what works for you, start to monitor that data. If something really takes off, you've got the justification to hire a full-time headcount. If it's not really working for you, you can cut your losses and move on and try something else. Alternatively, if you don't have a huge amount of languages to launch, but there's a couple you want to test or dip your toe in, then I would recommend outsource the keyword research to someone who speaks a language, outsource some content creation, upload it, get some data again to just inform your longer-term decision-making. This is exactly what we did at Wise. So we've tested in batches. Each of these markets that is live varies in size, it varies in investment, it varies in complexity, and it varies in success. But I've not found myself in a position where I've overcommitted something. We've been able to be very sort of sustainable and steady with it. Lesson number 5 is quite a simple one. Just be briefing the content in bulk. If you need to keep publishing new content, then you need to find as many efficiencies as you can. So obviously, if you don't plan ahead, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're briefing pieces of content one by one by one. It's extremely inefficient. What you want to do is get those keywords in a really logical structure where actually you have templated versions of content so that you can create one brief at a time and maybe get like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 pieces of content from a single brief because the structure is the same, but the topic is different. And a top tip for you is if you are creating loads of different series of content and you have to give them a name, just lock the cell. Don't let there be typos. Don't let people come up with their own names. It's very hard to kind of amalgamate it all together one day in the future, which we had to kind of undo at one point. My 6th lesson here is that there are some simple metrics which have really helped us to perfect this kind of operational discipline. Ironically, this is a stage about content automation, and we've seen some quite cool things. We just use a really manual spreadsheet. It's called the blog archive sheet, and everyone in the team will roll their eyes when we talk about it. You have 1 row per article on the blog and 1 column per thing that you want to measure. And we have loads of columns, but there are 5 in particular which I find myself referring back to quite frequently. And we paired this blog archive with Looker. Somebody just connected the 2 so that we can make some Looker graphs and start to see what's going on. So with these 5 individual things, there are some really easy questions I can answer with a graph at Wise, which I think is really helpful. So by capturing things like each individual owner name of the piece of content, I can just pull up a view and say, how's my content production looking for the team? Who's ahead, who is behind, which teams are doing better than others? Are there any concerns I need to delve into? By categorizing our content into categories and subcategories and series, I can look holistically across all the languages, all the markets, and just find out what's an individual topic that seems to perform well for Wise.com. In this fake example, I can see that cars works a lot better than bikes. But then by segmenting by language or by market, I can delve deeper, and I could say, well, which cars content in which country has the highest conversion rate? And you could see here, maybe Spain is better than Italy. By recording all the dates of all the actions when the articles were proofed, when they were published, when they were briefed, I can also start to look at things like how much of our content plan has been delivered this quarter. Are we on schedule, or are we ahead or behind? We're never ahead. That's the thing. And content tags was something we added a little later. So, for example, probably lots of people know Wise as a consumer product. You travel, you use it as a card when you're abroad. Not many people know that we have a business product, and we didn't used to have a business product. So we had to invent an extra thing. When we started writing business content, we wanted to be able to test and check, is the business content driving business conversions, or is it just accidentally coming from somewhere else? So by tagging it up was very helpful. So these are the 5 things I look at quite often. Lesson number 7 is that categorization helps measure at scale. There's no way you can pull a list of 15,000 blog articles on a monthly basis and try and determine what's going well and what's going not so well. So we just literally tag everything up by category, subcategory, series. So one example could be we have a business category with a subcategory underneath that for freelancers, a series of content beneath that on invoicing, and then all the content about invoices sits there. So if you see some kind of dramatic drop or some dramatic raise, you can check sort of layer by layer to dissect what's going on. Lesson number 8 is about making sure that you do your homework before you launch content in languages that you don't speak or understand. And of course, after you've made the mistake, like we have, you would learn and then you'll know never to do it again. So hopefully I can tell you something to avoid in the future. So in the UK, we're really familiar with the ASA. We know the guidelines that we have to operate within when we create content, and we know how to do things properly. Did you know in Singapore, the equivalent body says, you must not subvert family as a basic unit of society. So do you know what that means? And do you know if your content or marketing does it in Singapore? Maybe not. In Turkey, your marketing can't go against public morality, so you can't show people kissing. So imagine a scenario where I need to localize 1,000 pieces of English content into Turkish. Do I have a process that's going to check and catch all the images or the stock images that we have? And in the UAE, you can't show people's faces or license plate numbers, so this could actually get you up to 5 years in prison, which is the last thing you want when you're publishing content at your desk on a Friday. So always do your homework, pay somebody else to do the homework for you. We create these things called marketing playbooks. So when we need to launch in a brand new market, we make sure that we get some legal help or some compliance help to give us some guidelines to work within before we go crazy. We have had to delete content. We've had to delete entire markets because we got it wrong. Don't do that. Really simple one, content and data are your assets. So the number one thing you can get from your SEO content is organic traffic and conversions and revenue. There's more you can do with it too, so you can take the insight, figure out what works well for your organic content, and to create a YouTube channel using the same content. And of course, you can then embed the YouTube videos in that content that ranks, and you have this lovely cycle of organic traffic. Same with social media. You can find out what works well for your audience, what seems to resonate with them, it gets the best kind of performance on your blog or SEO content. And then you can translate it into social content too. It's really hard to fill a content calendar of social content, so anything that kind of skips a step is really helpful. Right, part 2, measuring impact. It turns out it takes our content on average 5 to 6 months to reach maturity. And Wise is a huge domain. It's really, really authoritative in our niche. It still takes this long. And this is helpful to know because we often will say things like, it depends, when other people who don't understand SEO ask us questions. But what's really helpful is this to set expectations for 2 parties. First party being yourself. You can forecast your own performance and know when to check back to make sure that something is performing as you would expect. But secondly, if you have questions from finance teams or your boss or your CEO, when can I see some results? You'll have an answer. So I segmented our average ranking time by the last 4 publishing years. And you can see that actually nothing has changed. It always takes between 5 and 6 months. And inevitably, the content performance starts to decline if left untouched, unless you go back and optimize and refresh. So I would say find this number for your own content so that you can set those expectations as well. Lesson number 11, not every page will perform. I was shocked and actually thrilled to see that 99.1% of our content has generated organic traffic. But even then, 140 people have never seen an article that we published, or 140 articles have never been seen by a person. On the other side of that coin, 72% of the content we published, of those 15,000 articles, has generated a paying Wise customer, which sounds great. That means 4,200 articles that we paid for, painstakingly planned, uploaded, and monitored, has done nothing. But that's fine, that is life. My advice is to find what that success ratio looks like for you, focus on the things that you can boost and get some return from, but just accept the fact that it's not going to work out like that. Lesson number 12 is that cohort data has really helped me add some clarity to some quite mystifying situations. So it links back to the blog archive sheet I told you about. By having all the published date information, I was able to uncover some of the mystery that was going on. So this was one of our major markets back across 2020 and 2021. We were publishing loads of new content. We were increasing the size of the team. We were optimizing. We were refreshing. And we could not get this number to meaningfully move. It seemed pretty flat, quarter on quarter over this 2-year period. So then I got hold of a cohort view where I segmented that graph by the year that the content was published. And when I filtered just by content that was published before that moment in time, I could see really clearly that my old content is declining. It's gone from 500,000 visits in a quarter down to 200,000. But when I tried to look at, well, what's the impact of the new stuff that we've been publishing, I can see that it is having incremental value. It is bringing growth. Something good is happening. So when I put it all together, that stagnant graph that was worrying me is suddenly no longer a problem because my perspective has been entirely reframed. I can see now with gratitude that I'm very happy we continue to publish new content, because if we hadn't, you saw what that first graph looked like and we would have been in a lot worse position. Lesson number 13, SEO ROI compounds. We know SEO is really valuable, but probably sometimes we have found ourselves in situations where we have to justify the value of SEO. So we did some work with our finance business partner to total up the total cost that we have spent on content over a 4-year period and the total revenue directly attributed to that content too. What we found was that in that study, we got a 3.2 times ROI on our investment. So if you imagine a scenario where I paid one person £30,000 per year just to publish the content, over that 4-year period, we'd have got a £400,000 return on that investment. But there is a quirky catch, which is that when we talk about the lifetime value of a customer at Wise, we just mean 12 months. So when you actually extrapolate that number over the full 4-year period of that study, the ROI becomes 6.9 times, which means that same investment, £30,000 a year for 4 years, would get me back nearly £828,000 just using our Wise product economics. It will be different based on the profit that you see. And there's another catch, which you might have spotted already, like the first catch, is that customers also ideally don't disappear after 4 years, and our content shouldn't disappear from Google after 4 years. So what you can see here is that year by year by year, the ROI on the spend that we put into the content and the return we get gets better and better. So hopefully it will get better even past this 4-year period. I have to come back next year and let you know. But you don't need a huge and ongoing investment to see some ROI, because we also sort of segmented it down a little bit to just imagining we had one person that we hired for 1 year and then lost them, and we had 4 years worth of data. And you could imagine in that scenario that's maybe a freelancer or a contractor. It doesn't even have to be a full 12 months. In that scenario, the ROI is 13 times. So that one person, say £30,000 investment for 1 year, 4 years later would get me back £390,000. It makes sense the ROI is so much higher because the total cost of the investment was a lot less over that period. But be warned, the bigger your content operation becomes, the more expensive and the slower it will become too. You need lots more types of roles. Some people need to be there just to help maintain. It's not all about just pure growth all the time. Which leads me to my final lesson, number 15, which is about content economics and investment, but specifically about how you can benchmark or communicate the success of your SEO work against paid channels in sort of one holistic view. So at Wise, this is a bit of an oversimplification, but I think it will be helpful. We operate within a payback model, which essentially means you can spend as much money as you like on marketing, providing that you can earn that back within a 12-month period. This is how we calculate it. It is a little bit more complex than that. But what we could see is that paid channels famously spend a lot of money month on month to get this performance. In SEO, you obviously don't have to pay a lot of money to keep an article ranking. So while these paid channels are spending this money and consistently trying to optimize to stay below that 12-month payback, what we can see here for the SEO content team is that they're on a 4-month payback, which means I can spend a huge amount of money and not get close to 12 months. I'm not going to, and I haven't, but one thing I also wanted to point out is this 2019 column. You can see that the payback in that year alone was 19 months, which means actually it would have failed to meet the investment criteria that we set for ourselves, this 12-month limit. But look at the first year after, the year after that, it dropped so dramatically that you see the results are really for the long term. So this is a helpful way that we can communicate the value of SEO alongside paid channels and all other marketing channels that we operate. So there are 2 things, if I could have you remember anything from this, there are 2 things I would like you to remember. The first one is always keep publishing new content. Failing to keep investing in brand new content could only harm your future growth exponentially. And secondly, having operational discipline that you can communicate clearly with everybody you need to, and some financial guardrails that keep your team operating sustainably and sensibly will help make your finance team, your boss, and your CEO love SEO as much as we do. That's everything. Thank you very much. Enjoy Brighton SEO.
Monthly reporting making you want to shove sharp things up your nose? Try Dragon Metrics, the all-in-one SEO software with mind-blowing reporting tools.